Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Dracut Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, also with Dracut Arts, Micha, Huang, and Emma Gies of the Flow Pistils, and ASL interpreter Nora. The Flow Pistils keep it real. Lyrical craftsmanship and lush harmonies abound. Heart emotions are tempered with humor, and their songs tell the story of a world wrought with imbalance, yearning for connection. Their single, Children of the End Times, was a winning finalist in the John Lennon songwriting competition in 2020. The duo take their craft seriously. Both have master's degrees in music and have traveled the world, learning from global masters. We have previously interviewed them about their musical journey and how they came to work together. You can see that interview on our YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about their continuing journey. The Flow Pistils are proud to be about a growing community of vibrant Asian American creators. In response to the horrific violence towards Asian Americans during the COVID era, they created music for the 23rd podcast of the history genre, Blood on Gold Mountain, which powerfully reclaims Asian American history. Hi, Micha and Emma. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
We'd like to talk about Blood on Blue Mountain and the music for Gold Mountain. How did you come up with these lyrics and how did you come up with this project?
Well, Blood on Gold Mountain was actually a continuation of a project that we were involved with here in Los Angeles, which is where we are now, kind of post-COVID. It was about telling and kind of reviving the story of the LA Chinatown massacre of 1871. And we had done a series of live events before COVID about this in partnership with the Chinese American Museum, which is downtown LA, and with the Claremont Colleges, which is out here in LA County. And when COVID hit, we had to kind of rethink our production for that year, which was for it was for, I can't actually remember right now, but it was for one of the important anniversaries of, it was either 149 or 150 anyway, of the massacre. And so we decided to do a podcast, but not like a dialogue podcast, something that's more like a serialized audiobook with a full musical score. So that was the process behind that.
It's really an incredible work put together. I was very impressed by all that you did.
Well,
thank you. Yeah, it was a huge project and we spent many months. So Micha wrote the whole script for the podcast, and then we together and with some of our friends recorded the soundtrack. Micha did the composition and brought in different musicians. And Micha's dad was the narrator of the podcast, Huang. So it was fun working with him.
He's got a good rough voice. It's good for the kind of Wild West thing. Yeah, I think it was a little different from working in like a like short form song based medium, which is what we kind of have been doing before, as last time that we came through Dracut Arts, So this was more long form, everything was at least 30 minutes long, and the very, very production heavy in terms of bringing in a lot of different sounds.
Right.
So it was a good creative challenge.
Yeah.
What does Asian American mean to you? Because I mean, people think of that and so many different things spring to mind, right? Because people say to me, for instance, that I'm an Italian American, but I'm third generation and I don't relate to Italy at all, but my father did. And his father was from Italy. So they had a very strong connection. But then people interpret me differently. So I wondered how you interpret Asian American and what that means for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, the two of us, being a couple that crosses some of the nominal delineations of who's who and who's what, we think about it a lot. And I think that one interesting thing about like the idea of like Asian identity is that it's really there's not really any idea of Asianness
Yeah,
in East or South or Central Asia, like in a lot of the places, it's like you only become Asian when you step into the gaze of a circumscribed and exclusive population that defines itself as not Asian, right?
well, right,
Yeah.
because actually, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, a lot of people would just say like European, right? And just have a generic thing for Italian but there's so many different countries that I wouldn't relate, well, I still wouldn't relate to being Italian, but there's Germany and Austria and Czech and it's the same thing in Asia. There's so many different countries and they're so hugely distinct. And the
Mhm.
cultures are distinct. And even within China, say, there are very distinct cultures throughout the country.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's always been interesting for my family because my dad's parents, both immigrated to the United States from Hong Kong and mainland China, separately, and they actually come from two different ethnic groups,
Wow.
which have a very troubled history. Like one, my grandma, for instance, is from like kind of an ethnic group who's indigenous to the southern shore area, like Guangzhou, like the Hong Kong area, whereas my grandpa comes from a tribe called Hakka or Kejia, which is like they're like people who live in mountains. And they, in fact, one of the events that we touch on in Blood on Gold Mountain, which was a big part of what pushed the first wave of Chinese immigration to the United States, was a war between the Hakka and the occupying imperial forces, which is yet another ethnic group from another place, which is about as far away from the Hong Kong, the Pearl River Delta area as I feel like it's about as far away from the Pearl River Delta, like Beijing is about as far from Hong Kong as Montreal is from like Fort Lauderdale. It's far. It would be like an Algonquin tribe imperializing like the people of the Southwest or something. So there's so much complication, and for that reason, I often think of Asian American as like a term that almost like problematizes the idea of race or ethnicity as something that can be used to catch all in these situations, because it's so complicated, it's so tangled.
Huh. What do you mean by problematize?
Well, like the idea, like, how like if you take if you're filling out a census form or something, like there'll be like race, Asian or black or what, and it's like, I think that in Asia and in the diasporas of East Asia, especially if we're considering Europe not to be Asia, which is questionable from a geographical perspective, but like from East and Central Asia, it's like there's not a sense of race like in the American sense, like that's something that like the Japanese don't consider themselves to be Asian, the people of the steppes consider themselves to be very different from the people of the shores. Obviously, South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, these are all vastly different areas, but they're also deeply connected by history. You do genetics, and it's just like, wow, you have people in East Asia are genetically related to people in East Africa, but they're also genetically related to people in North America, whereas like people in Central Asia are more, but they're all connected. And I think it's a big contiguous continent that, you know, the people have been moving around for a long time. And I think that for that reason, that's both a problem for Asian Americans in that because we don't feel like we really fit into like narratives of like race and like identity mandated in such stark terms, we don't really have like a leg to stand on in terms of being understood by each other or by other people as a people, because we're not a people. We're not like an ethnic group.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That makes-
also, sorry.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And what you're saying is the same thing I've heard from other groups of people. You know, that as soon as we start putting up divisions, they get very complicated.
Yeah.
So easier, so much easier if we would just say, you know, forget the divisions. Let's talk about like the meat of it. You know, let's all go out to enjoy the music or the art or the meal or whatever that everyone brings, and bring the richness in.
Yeah.
And then we're all fuller for it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I think like on that note, you know, engaging with people's individual experiences and stories is, I think, what we have found is, you know, the best way to really understand, because everyone is so different and everyone has their own stories. Yeah, and we actually kind of got the idea for Blood on Gold Mountain from this performance series that we had been doing in universities across the country called Under Our Skins, which was just this. It was an opportunity for people to come and present their individual stories, something that, you know, a story that someone looking at them would never expect, you know, to hear necessarily. And we would accompany that with improvised music and you know, slight performance stuff. So it would really elevate these stories, and I think that kind of gave us the feeling of how important telling this story about the LA Chinatown Massacre could be, and supporting it through the music, how that could really just make it connectable for people, you know, because that's really what we're just trying to do, is create connection.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, connections make a big difference, a huge difference.
Yeah.
So that's why you think that music and art are important to the Asian American experience and movement, just to help bring connection between individuals.
I think, yeah, like the cool thing about the cool thing about music and art, right? One of the cool things about music and art is that, like, I think it kind of acts as like a substrate from which, like, kind of the experiences that can't be put into words flows between people, you know? And I think that one of the things that really troubles like the whole kind of Asian American situation, you know, so to speak, is this incredible lack of understanding, you know, like that's you know, we the whole narrative of pluralism in the United States has been so influenced by political factors and stuff, and still is. And like, I think that mostly, you know, people from the Asian American, the thousand Asian American cultures and experiences have been very, very, very marginalized, like by like the mainstream dialogues. And I think it's been really disappointing during the recent kind of racial reckoning stuff, like to see how prejudice against people of Asian extraction and stuff has really, like, it's been something that has not been comfortably framed, like within the like developments, because like there's just not, it's just not as baked in to like the education system, for instance. And so like I think that the music and art aspect really creates the opportunity for the individuals across boundaries or within nominal boundaries to have a flash of shared experience. And I think that that creates a personal connection. So instead of being like, we're connected because we're part of the same race or part of the same like political coalition per se, it's more like it creates connections like you and I are connected as people because of our internal experience. And even though the external trappings might be very different, there is that kind of undeniable personal aspect of connection that the music and art brings out.
So I saw you do that with your in-person presentations before COVID. And you just mentioned that the education system has fallen down in this. What is your vision that would help pick it up? Do you have a vision for how this could be done?
I have a little bit of a vision, though I don't know how it would be put into practice besides by making personal connections. But I think that for me, and this is partially because of my individual experience, I'm not speaking for anyone really like who doesn't kind of come from where I'm coming from on this, and that's necessary. But like, I think, and I want to preface this by saying that it definitely, I understand that this kind of idea is something that is not very fashionable in kind of like the more politically focused kind of strata of like the Asian American movement or anything, but I think that the real vision for me is like to let the nebulousness of like such like a broad identity kind of unravel the fictions and the historical quirks that the ideas of race and identity that feel like they really tyrannically structure a lot of the dialogues and even social relationships in American culture in a lot of situations, to let them unravel, because they're built on quicksand, you know, like the nominal racial divisions and stuff. They're just not, they don't hold up to really in-depth scrutiny historically, genetically, like anything, even culturally, you know, like and so that's the closest thing to a vision that I feel like I have is to actually let it's like, you know, in America they started with kind of like the, you know, white black white, or like the native white black native black white like kind of situation, but then more and more people start to add, and eventually it's just like this is like a bowl with too many oranges in it, you know, it's overflowing, you know. Like,
what do you feel about this, Emma?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Micha just said. I just think that, I don't know, the more we can kind of just be open to people in the moment, and yeah, just be open to whatever they might have to share or contribute, and yeah, just trying to not even so much suspend judgment as just being open, because people are gonna, I don't know, everyone is just so very different, and it's impossible and to trust each other, you know. It's like someone may share an experience that you have no experience of. This is something in my experience, like as a white American, like hearing about some of the experiences that Micha had growing up, or Micha's dad. I grew up in the South, and I never heard of, you know, Chinese American. I'm doing this because of our conversation. Like, you know, some of the kind of like racialized hate that a lot of, you know, Chinese Americans and other, just all sorts of people have experienced in this country. It's not just black and white, which is the story I was told growing up. So trusting people, trusting their experiences and being open and yeah. So yeah.
Mhm. And I think something that Emma, that you really have had really interesting experiences with is like, like the label of being like a white American applies to you certainly, in like a lot of ways, but like with the level of immersion in, like what we've been doing and with like my family and like with the different people who we've been working with, it's like, I feel like, at least from my perspective and from the traditionally from the perspective of some of the people of East Asia, like it's like, at what point do you step across that boundary? At what point are you quote unquote one of us instead of quote unquote one of them, whatever that means, like that there's an old saying that I don't actually know the source, my dad quotes it all the time, but that like, like in the days before the big empires in China, like the people of the Central Plains, like would define if you were cooked or uncooked. And if you're cooked, you're in the in group. And if you're uncooked, you're in the out group. And the way that you can tell if a tribe is cooked or uncooked is whether they eat with their hands or whether they eat with eating sticks, chopsticks, like,
Yeah.
and the way that a tribe makes the transition is like, hey, like we want to be cooked or we want to be uncooked is if most of their members are eating with, and that's the identity signifier.
Oh,
So I don't know. That's just a little food for thought, so to speak.
that's interesting. I mean, there's things that I could never experience though. I mean, I was raised as a middle-class white American and I identify with that. And that's, even though there are other labels that people put on me, I can't escape my past, right? And I can't escape that, even though I was Christian, I was raised in a mostly Jewish neighborhood. So I have insights and respect for that religion that a lot of people who didn't have so strong a presence of that religion might not have. And during the race riots in Newark, before you guys were born, they closed off the street in front of my house so that Black people wouldn't come up. And there was a real fear for a while. So all these things are in my past, but I know that they affect my present. And in a lot of ways, I feel really ignorant, because I don't know even what younger people experience as the world today. And even if they were raised in the same geography of where I was raised, it's a different experience now. It's interesting. Tom and I were in Ireland, and one of the things multiple tour guides said, because we went on a few "what is this country about" tours, was that anyone who ever had any family that ever set foot in Ireland, if they became famous for any reason, Ireland claimed them. which is a really interesting idea, and it felt really uncomfortable to me because I don't want to be claimed by this country that I don't know anything about. But I can also understand that, see, I'm going to say maternalistic thing because I grew up with grandmothers who just loved and encompassed everybody. Not everyone has that type of embracing grandmother, but that was just, she loved you just because you were you, and that's a wonderful thing. And taken from that perspective, if you have a little bit of anything in you related to her, she would love you. And in a way, that's what the Irish people were saying. And it would be nice if we could all take that. We all have that bit of humanness in us because we're all human. So if we could have that embracing of each other, that would be really a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we all share so much common experience, regardless. Like we all feel sad, we all feel happy, we all hurt.
We all feel
We all-
climate change.
Climate change. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we have some more, maybe slightly more important maybe issues to be addressing, but I mean, yeah.
So do you see your music as going forth as an ambassador for Asian Americans or just as ambassador for humanity? And do you see a difference?
What do you think? That's a tough one to answer. I think, you know, especially the last question, because like it's like yes and yes and yes, kind of, you know, like I think that really in terms of connecting the Asian American bit and the humanity bit is really kind of like the key to like the work on like a social level, because I just know from like my experiences that regardless of what the source of the things that people think about you is, if you're being dehumanized like in the eyes of people who you're interacting with, then the barriers to connection are really high, and the energy output that you have to, you know, like engage in to establish connection is unsupportably high in like a lot of like in a lot of situations. So it's like you break down those kinds of barriers of dehumanization, you know, you know, the idea that's just like, oh, like you're like bad, and like you just because like, you know, Chinese bad or Asian bad is your dogs and eat Uyghurs and you're bad, you know, like what I mean. It's just like you get past some of that, and then like the kind of human aspect just, so it's almost like it's both. It's trying to get them to meet, you know, like and I think you can never escape from what people's perceptions of you are, but you can transcend those perceptions through interaction, whether that's personally or through art or a combination of both. So it's all kind of in the same flow, in a way, don't you think?
Definitely. Yeah. That was well said.
So actually, it seems like you've answered a fundamental question, which we usually ask people in a different part, but of why music and art is important.
Mm.
So many reasons, right? And I think that there's each thing about it that's important leads to another thing, connects back to a previous thing. And, so I would never presume to say that I had figured out exactly why it's important, you know, holistically, but we can feel why it's important specifically in this context or in any other. And, you know.
So do you have any other big projects in the works that we should know about?
So I guess we have a big project coming up this October, which is another performance that is connected to Blood on Gold Mountain, the podcast. This one is sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts, and it's going to be performed at Scripps College and the
USC Museum in Pasadena.
Yeah.
So,
So
And
yeah.
What is the content of that project?
that one's kind of moving forward from talking about racialized violence and stuff to really kind of plumbing the internality of the experience of you know, being kind of saddled with an identity that doesn't necessarily conform to your actual experience, which I think is something that it's like no Asian American really feels and acts like what they think that an Asian American is supposed to feel or act like, you know, like, and that's part of it. And I think we're trying to go deep, not only with culture, but also with like with the ways that we're kind of bringing out the internal experience. So there's one movement of the piece that's going to utilize biofeedback with like the response of a patient on stage feeding a synthesizer patch, which kind of turns certain kind of signals extracted from their body into control signals that alter the sound. And then there's another one that is a revisitation of John Cage's I Ching like experiments from a more culturally informed standpoint, for instance. So it's just kind of those kinds of, it's almost like playing around with the human experience side more, as opposed to storytelling per se.
That sounds so incredible.
sounds
I'm
really
really
cool.
looking forward to seeing it. Thank you so much for being with us today, Emma and Micha. We look forward to your performance at our September Arts
Yes.
Saturdays. For more information about this event and our other programs, or to be a sponsor, please go to dracutarts.com.
Thank you so much, Diane and Tom.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And thank you for the